The hallway hummed, and my feet forgot how to move, as if the floor might swallow me whole. Dr. Harris looked up, and his eyes told the story before his mouth did. He said, "Emma, I'm so sorry," and the sound cracked the air like ice. The clock clicked once, and the world split neatly into before and after. A nurse touched my elbow, gentle as wind, and I pulled away because anything kind would break me. I stared at the door as if Lily might stride through laughing. I said, "No, you must have the wrong room," and my voice sounded borrowed. The lights buzzed, turning skin to paper and hope to noise. My phone vibrated, and her photo bloomed like a dare. I whispered, "Lily, please wake up," and the whisper felt heavier than a scream. Somewhere a cart rattled, and the sound stitched me to the floor. Dawn crawled in like a stranger, and the apartment wore last night's silence like a coat. I opened the door and the smell of cold coffee met me, stubborn and stale. I set my keys down, and they sounded too loud for this small grief. I said, "Lily, I brought you home," and the words startled the still air. A box waited on the table, the one the nurse handed me without meeting my eyes. I touched the lid and my pulse jumped like it might wake something inside. The radiator clicked, counting breaths I could not take. My phone blinked with messages I could not answer. I whispered, "I need you to be here," and the whisper went nowhere. Light found dust in the room, and dust found my hands. I lifted the lid and the air changed, like opening a winter window. Her scarf lay on top, still shaped by her shoulders. I said, "You always stole this from me," and the joke collapsed under its own weight. Beneath it sat a small camcorder with a dead battery and a thumbprint I knew. I traced the plastic and felt the echo of a laugh I could not place. The couch sighed as I sat, and the room leaned toward the past. I imagined the screen lighting up and giving me back a minute I had lost. I said, "Show me something good," and the plea trembled through my teeth. The radiator ticked twice, as if it were waiting too. Outside, a siren passed and left a thin blue quiet. The camcorder refused me, so I searched my phone and found a clip I had ignored. Thumbnail of sun on water, and her hand reaching past the lens. I said, "Of course you took the camera," and it almost sounded like a smile. I pressed play, and the screen spilled summer into the gray room. Wind in the mic, gulls and our voices tangling like ribbon. "Move, Em, you're in the shot," she said once, and I heard myself laugh. The sound cut off at 3 seconds, a corrupted file ending mid-breath. I stared at the blank square, and my heart kept running into it. I said, "I remember the rest," and the lie tasted close to true. I carried the box to the bedroom and set it on the quilt like a guest. The mirror caught me and did not look away. I said, "You promised we'd go back there," and the room waited for the next part. I pictured the pier boards under our shoes, and the way the wind pushed us together. I promised the air, "I'll keep that day bright, no matter how dark it gets." The promise felt stubborn enough to hold me up. My knees touched the bed, and I did not sit because falling seemed too easy. I placed the scarf across the mirror frame like a small flag. The window rattled, and a cloud moved, and the light changed its mind. I kept breathing, one thin thread at a time. Morning stretched thin across the kitchen, and I stood with my hands pressed to the counter as if stone might carry me. The clock said work was waiting, but I had no words to explain why I couldn't go. My phone buzzed again, a friend asking if I had eaten, and I let it ring out into silence. The box still sat there, and I wondered if grief could rot cardboard. I whispered, "I'll be fine," though my chest knew it was not true. The radiator ticked, a stubborn reminder that time moves whether you're ready or not. I thought of Lily laughing in this very room when she burned toast and blamed me. The memory hit like a wave, sharp and salt. I said, "You always left crumbs everywhere," and the echo broke in the empty air. A knock came, and I froze as though the sound had teeth. The door creaked open, and Sarah stepped in with her usual quiet force. She carried a grocery bag full of bread and fruit, like it might fix the hole in my chest. She said, "You haven't been out, have you?" and her tone was soft, but firm as stone. I wanted to say, I can't, but instead, I gave her the silence I'd been feeding all morning. She set the bag on the counter, filling the room with the smell of oranges. I watched her hands move, strong and familiar, and I remembered her holding mine the night of the call. I whispered. I didn't hear the phone ring, and the lie cracked against my teeth. Sarah moved through the kitchen like she belonged, and I let her. She poured water into the kettle, her back steady, her silence patient. I thought of telling her the truth, that I feared leaving the apartment because grief might follow me outside. She said, "You need food, Emma," and the kettle hissed, agreeing. I sat at the table, hands knotted in my lap, while her strength filled the space I couldn't. My eyes drifted to the scarf over the mirror, a fragile flag of memory. I wanted to ask her if love could keep someone alive in more than memory. Instead I said, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And the admission felt like a splinter pulled out. The kettle whistled, and Sarah set 2 cups between us. I stared at the rising steam like it might spell answers. She said, "You can't keep all of this inside," and the words pushed air into a room that had been starving. I swallowed, and silence stretched, heavy as stone. I said, "Every time I close my eyes, I see her," and my voice almost broke in half. Sarah reached across the table, her hand covering mine, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. The world felt less jagged with her there. The tea cooled, untouched, while her eyes told me she wasn't leaving. I whispered, "Don't go," and she didn't. Later, Sarah left the groceries in neat lines on the counter, a quiet act of care. I watched her shoulder brush the doorframe as she turned back once more. She said, "I'll come tomorrow," and her voice carried certainty I couldn't argue with. I nodded, words too heavy to climb out of my mouth. The door closed, and the apartment folded into silence again. I looked at the scarf, its weight on the mirror like her presence pressing into the room. I said, "I'll try," though no one heard but me. The kettle was cold now, cups half full, steam gone, but the faint trace of oranges lingered like a promise. I stepped outside because the walls had learned my name and would not stop saying it. The street still smelled like last night's rain. A deli radio spilled a song Lily loved, bright and cruel. I said, "Not now," but the chorus climbed my ribs. I bought bread I did not need, so the cashier would not see me drown. The bell over the door laughed as I fled. The crosswalk blinked and my feet forgot the rule of waiting. I saw the pier in the chrome of a passing bus and felt summer tug my sleeve. I said, "I can't keep running," and the city answered with brakes and breath. I carried the loaf like it could anchor me home. I took the subway stairs because the day felt steeper than a ladder. The air changed to iron and wind. A train roared and the platform trembled through my shoes. My pulse learned the rhythm, and then outran it. I said, "We promised to ride to the last stop," and memory shook the rails. My throat narrowed until breath turned thin as wire. I counted tiles to stay upright and lost track at 9. The tunnel sighed like a sleeping animal, and I stepped back from the edge. I whispered, "I'm still here," though the dark tried to disagree. I climbed until daylight fell across my hands like mercy. The phone rang the minute I locked the door behind me. A man said, "This is Mr. Kane from billing," and every syllable stacked like bricks on my lungs. He asked for forms and decisions with dates. I said, "Please not today," and he paused, but the rules did not. He spoke of deadlines that could not learn compassion. I stared at the camcorder battery bleeding a red lead. I said, "I need one good thing," and the words anchored me to the table. He listed options like weather. I promised to call back and hung up before my voice broke. The charger hummed as if it believed in rescue. A message flashed from Daniel, asking when I would return to shift. He added a smile that did not belong to the sentence. I typed "I need more time" and watched the draft breathe. I erased it because need felt like trespass. I said, "I can't clock into grief," and the room kept the secret. I opened Sarah's thread and closed it again, afraid my need would bruise her kindness. The charger clicked, and the light held steady. I asked the mirror, "What would you do?" and learned it only knows how to reflect. The unsent bubble waited like a held breath. I set the phone down before it could decide for me. Clouds rolled in like a thought I could not stop having. Rain traced the window, and the room turned ocean-colored. I opened the corrupted clip again, hungry for a seam to pry. 3 seconds of sun and her hand reaching. Then the sudden cliff. I said, "There has to be more," and the vow steadied my spine. I dug through drawers and found the small card reader we lost twice last year. I set the laptop on the table like an altar. The fan spun up, and the cursor blinked with patient faith. I whispered, "I will find the last light," and the rain agreed against the glass. Night came early, and I did not turn on the ceiling lamp. The laptop screen glowed deep into the night, daring me to believe it held a secret. I clicked through file after file, each labeled in Lily's careless handwriting, each one opening into fragments of laughter and blur. My chest tightened when the corrupted clip blinked back to life for a heartbeat, showing her face lit by the sun. I said, "Wait, don't go," but the frame froze mid-breath. My pulse hammered as if I had run a mile, though I hadn't moved an inch. The silence that followed was worse than noise, thick and merciless. I pressed replay again and again, praying the machine might change its mind. My hands shook, and I whispered, "Please, just give her back." At dawn, I dragged myself to the church 2 blocks away, though I had not prayed in years. The doors groaned like they remembered my absence. Candles flickered, their flames fragile but stubborn. I sank into the pew, wood pressing against my back like judgment. I said, "I don't even know what I'm asking for," and the whispers scattered in the cavernous silence. A woman ahead crossed herself, and I wondered if faith could be borrowed. My eyes burned as I stared at the stained glass, the colors breaking into shards across the floor. I whispered, "If she's anywhere, tell her I'm still here." The words cracked, but did not echo. Later that morning, Sarah found me on the church steps, her breath fogging in the cold. She said, "You don't have to do this alone," her voice calm but unyielding. I wanted to argue, but my body leaned toward her warmth before my mind could stop it. She sat beside me, setting a thermos in my hands like it might anchor me to earth. I whispered, she wouldn't let me quit, and the words cut into the wind. Sarah's hand touched my arm, steady as always. I swallowed the bitter tea, letting it burn down into my hollow chest. I said, "I don't know where to go from here," and the truth hung between us like smoke. By afternoon, I forced myself to the pier, the place where the last good memory lived. The boards groaned beneath my steps, each creak a reminder of her weight missing beside me. The wind pushed hair into my face, stinging like needles. I said, "You laugh so hard here," and the ocean caught my words and tore them apart. The gulls wheeled overhead, merciless and loud. I pulled the scarf tighter around my throat, as if it could shield me from what the water knew. My hands clutched the rail until my knuckles burned. I whispered, "I will carry you," though the waves did not listen. The horizon blurred and refused to answer. That night I dreamed of her voice calling my name, clear as water. I woke with my pulse running wild, the apartment black around me. The scarf glowed faintly in moonlight, draped across the mirror. I sat up, dizzy with the weight of absence and memory. I said, "I'll find a way to keep you close," and the vow cracked like glass but stayed. My fingers brushed the camcorder on the table, its silent body heavy as a stone heart. I whispered, "Don't let this be the end," and the sound barely stirred the room. Outside, the rain began again, each drop steady as a heartbeat I couldn't hear anymore. The SD card loaded like a held breath finally exhaled. A folder named Private hid inside another, shy as a secret. I clicked a file, and the speakers breathed wind and engine hum. A seatbelt creaked, then her voice slid through like sunlight. Lily said, "I'm on my way, it's fine," and my ribs tightened. A second voice bled in, tinny with urgency, and I knew it. Daniel said, "Please hurry. They'll cut Emma if we miss this. The word hurry scraped the room raw. I paused the clip and the cursor blinked like a warning. I said, "Tell me this is not what it sounds like," but the air refused. I hit play, hungry and afraid, as tires hissed on wet road. The file stuttered and froze on a frame of gray sky. I whispered, "Don't leave me with half a truth," and pressed replay. I took the clip to the place I feared most, the break room that still smelled like burnt coffee. Daniel looked up, and the color left his face like a tide. He said, "Emma, I was going to call you," and my throat went dry. I set the laptop down and hit play before courage ran. Lily said, "I'll be fast," and he stared at his hands as if they might explain. Daniel said, "They were cutting hours," and I panicked, voice thin and small. I said, "You called her in a storm for me," and the floor tilted. He reached out like apology had weight, but I stepped back. The clip ended on static that sounded like rain. I said, "You hid this," and he did not say no. Back home, another file waited like a door I had missed. The thumbnail was the pier, all light and bravado. I pressed play and Summer rushed the room. Lily held the camcorder too close, laughing at her own face. Lily said, I stole your scarf again, so come catch me." Wind fussed the mic and gulls heckled the sky. She turned the camera, and the water spilled diamonds. Lily said, "Daniel asked for a favor, but I'll make it back in time." The words hit like a stone thrown through glass. She blew a kiss, and the frame jumped to black. I said, "You were racing the clock for me," and the truth landed hard. My phone buzzed, and Sarah's name lit up like a lifeline. I answered before fear could edit me. Sarah said, "Are you safe?" and the ground steadied a little. I told her about the files and the storm and the word hurry. Silence poured through the line until it found a place to rest. Sarah said, "He asked me for Lily's number that afternoon," soft as regret. Heat climbed my face like a fever I could not sweat out. I said, "You gave it to him," and the room shrank. She said, "I thought it was for you, and I'm sorry," and I sat down slow. The apology had edges I could not hold. I said, "This is bigger than sorry," and let the words stay. Night gathered at the window like a witness that would not leave. I laid the clips on a timeline, as if order could make mercy. The audio hissed, then steadied, then delivered the line that split me. Daniel said, "They'll replace her if we miss this," and the car sang Wet Road. Lily said, "Tell her not to worry," and my hands forgot their skill. Static flared and something metal clattered far away. I said, "I should have been with you," and the laptop threw back a pale answer. The room felt too small for the size of this truth. I saved the files with trembling care. I said, "Tomorrow, you will tell me everything," and the vow held. I met Daniel in the empty parking lot where the lights hummed louder than our voices. He stood with his hands buried deep, eyes darting like he wanted to run. I said, "She answered your call that night, not mine." He swallowed, and the silence stretched until it cut. He said, "I didn't know the storm would take her," voice cracking under weight. I stepped closer, heat rising in my chest. "You lied to me," I said, each word sharp as broken glass. He looked at me with guilt that had no strength to stand. My hands shook, and I whispered, "She died carrying my name." The air thickened, but I refused to move first. He tried to step closer, but I lifted my hand like a barrier. "You made her choose speed over safety," I said, and the words rang louder than the hum of lamps. He said, "I thought it would help you," and the excuse soured the air. I felt the weight of every sacrifice, every tear, pressing on my chest. I shouted, "She's gone because of you," and the sound startled even me. He flinched, his mouth opening with no defense inside. The rain began again, fine needles stitching the space between us. My knees trembled, but I stayed upright, because falling here would be too merciful. I whispered, "I'll never forgive this," and he lowered his eyes. The storm thickened, and I backed toward my car, the keys biting into my palm. Daniel said, "Please, don't walk away," and the plea broke thin. I turned, shoulders stiff as stone. My breath fogged against the cold air, trembling with rage. I said, "You don't get to ask me for anything," and the rain poured harder, sealing the words into the night. My pulse slammed in my ears as I pulled the door open. I looked back once, not at his face but at the space between us where she should have been. I said, "That's where she belongs, not in your lie." And I drove before grief pinned me. At home, I dropped the keys and collapsed against the door, the sound echoing like thunder. My chest heaved, and the room tilted under grief's weight. I dragged myself to the table, where the camcorder still waited. I pressed play, though I knew the files would break me again. Lily's laugh filled the room, raw and alive, and for a second I forgot she was gone. I said, "You're still here," and my tears blurred the glow. The scarf on the mirror trembled in the draft, as if answering. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles screamed, unwilling to let go of the sound. Thorm raged outside, but the voice was louder. Thorm slowed to a whisper, and I lay on the couch with her voice still echoing. I closed my eyes and saw her walking ahead on the pier, calling me to catch up. I said, "I'll carry this for both of us," and my chest eased. The apartment smelled of wet wool and dust, but inside the silence, her laughter clung like a thread. The camcorder light finally dimmed, leaving only the hum of the radiator. I reached for the scarf, pressing it to my cheek, pretending it was her hand. I whispered, "I will keep you alive in memory," and the promise felt like breath. Outside, the rain stopped, leaving the night raw and clean. Morning slipped in soft and careful, like it knew where I was hurting. I opened the window and let the air rinse last night from the walls. The kettle sang a smaller song than before, but it still sang. I buttered toast the way Lily teased me for, edge to edge, no crumbs. I said, "I'm going to carry you kindly," and the room did not resist. I folded the blanket, cleared the table, and set the laptop aside. The silence felt less like an enemy and more like a visitor. I touched the scarf and felt steadier than yesterday. I said, "I will not let the worst thing be the only thing." The promise sat down beside me and stayed. I met Sarah on the corner where the bus sighs and the bakery warms the air. She handed me a paper cup, and her eyes asked more than her mouth. I said, "I'm still here." And her shoulders eased. We walked without rushing, letting small talk rebuild the street. She said, "You don't have to be brave today," and the words fit. I told her I would try to forgive what I could and lay down what I could not. She nodded, like a vow shared is lighter to hold. I said, "Thank you for staying," and she said, "Always." The city moved around us and did not knock us over. I brought the camcorder to the pier and let the wind tune my breathing. The 3 seconds of summer glowed and then ended, as always. I closed my eyes and stepped into the space the clip denied me. In the dark behind my eyelids, she ran ahead and turned to wave. I said, "I remember the rest," and for once it felt true. Waves shouldered the posts and the gulls argued like choir boys. I let the laugh from the clip loop until it braided with the present. I whispered, "I will keep this bright," and the water agreed. The horizon held steady while I learned how to stand inside it. At home, I framed the scarf above the desk like a flag that means continue. I printed a still from the clip, all flair and mischief, and set it beside the lamp. I said, "I can forgive myself for not knowing," and felt the room shift. I wrote a letter to Daniel I might never send, spelling out the harm without venom. I said, "I choose not to live inside that night," and the words held. I opened the window wider and let the late sun paint the floor. The ache stayed, but it learned new edges. I breathed in and did not count to stay upright. Night pressed its ear to the glass and listened while I finished the day. I stood by the window with the city humming like a low promise. I said, "You are more than the way you left," and the words did not shake. I thought of the pier and the laugh, and the hand reaching past the lens. I touched the frame and felt the fabric answer in silence. I whispered, I will do it all again, to love you still, and let the line rest. The room exhaled, and the dark turned softer at the edges. I turned off the lamp and kept one memory lit inside me.